the vocational offer at UCM is quite broad. The further and higher education offer there is pretty good. And the identification really of the skills shortage that we're facing on the Isle of Man, really spot on.
When it comes to vocational training, is it something you monitor or keep an eye on at the college? Because, as she says there, it's ever changing.
It is broader than just the college, actually, vocational education. It is one of the department's key themes at the moment, is to try and make sure that pupils and students have a choice about where they're going, so not trying to force people down any particular route, and make sure that what we're kind of producing and what the offer is making sure that that is aligned with what industry really needs. So when people are going out there saying, well, what do I want to do with my life, how do I want to get a career or progress in my existing career, what's the right way of doing that, what's the best way of doing that, and how can the education system support me in making that choice?
Well, you mentioned how broad it is there. Is it growing? Are we seeing more and more of that kind of training, and is it more useful?
I think we're definitely seeing it grow. I think we're seeing a wider acceptance now of things that are vocational. I mean, traditionally, you'd look at, and especially when I was in school, it was, well, you go to school, you get your A-levels, you go to university, then you get a job. Whereas these days, that's definitely not the case for everyone, and I don't think it ever has really been the case for everyone. I mean, if you look at me, I went to school, did my A-levels, went to university, did a degree, did another degree, then I went off and came back and did a professional qualification and got work that way. And whereas I was working in the same industry with people doing the same qualification who hadn't taken that route. They'd gone straight from school straight into that training program and that level of work. And so you can actually get to where you want to go without necessarily having to go through all this academic education necessarily. So there are multiple routes, I think, to getting into the career path that people want. And like I said, it's about giving people the choice and all the information so they know actually what's the right path for them as an individual.
I guess from what you're saying, there have always been alternatives in place, but it's the traditional element, it's the mindset change. Is it something that you're actively encouraging people to do, to broaden that mindset or be aware perhaps of other options?
I think so. I think it is. I think the department is trying to develop a lifelong learning approach so that when people are going for work, going for jobs, trying to get a new career, for example, or trying to progress in their career, that they have the ability to access the training that they need to do that. So whether that's completely retraining into something new, or whether it's upskilling to get a promotion or the job that they want. So I think there is definitely an acceptance these days that that education is there for more than simply education's sake, that actually it should be about helping people find the right pathway into work. And so I think Joe mentioned that UCM sit on a number of boards and they work quite closely with employers, and you'll probably be aware that Joe sits on the business agency board within the Department for Enterprise, and so there is a very close working relationship there between enterprise and education, trying to build on that. Well, what does industry need? What skills are going to get people into work, and how do we make sure that those skills are available to them, that training is available to people?
Is there a danger that the relationship is too close, that we'll be pushing people into careers that work for the Isle of Man, but not necessarily the individual?
I think that terminology isn't really appropriate, because we don't pushing people in any particular direction. It's about trying to make sure that all the options are there for people and they have all the information to make the right choice, and so people aren't feeling pressured into going down a particular route if that isn't the right route for them. But it is important to remember that when we are providing training courses and educational opportunities for people, there's not much point in providing somebody with educational opportunities if they're not going to be able to then use those skills and that knowledge in the workplace. So there is a balance to be found, I think. I think we're getting better at that, about working closer between education and enterprise. But it really isn't about pushing people down any particular career path. It's about making sure that they're aware of what opportunities exist and the best way for them to access those opportunities.
And you said you're working very closely with enterprise. How regular are those conversations, especially when Joe or Mrs. Pretty or Joe Pretty talks about the ever-developing nature of education, especially vocational courses?
Well, they're pretty much constant. They're ongoing, because some of the conversations are quite formal at sort of board meetings, board level. A lot of them are more informal conversations directly between education, sort of with Joe or the college, and individual employers. I mean, I myself sit in both enterprise and education as political member, and so for me, it's almost a daily part of the job, making sure that the two departments are aligned in some way.
Well, going on to your slightly enterprise hat then for a second, what areas do you think of enterprise or elsewhere that are the most in need of courses like these, vocational courses?
I think this again comes back down to what do you treat as a vocational course. So myself, I'm an accountant. I trained as an accountant whilst working under a training contract with a local firm. Now, is that a vocational course or is that an academic qualification? Well, it crosses the line. It's a bit of both. I think traditionally people have tended to think of vocational courses as the more hands-on trades. Sort of construction is really big on vocational training. But these days, actually, we're seeing that it's being accepted more and more in other spheres as well. And so for me, a vocational course would be one that you can study whilst working, essentially. So you're working and you're learning at the same time. So really, in that context, pretty much across the piece in industry, this kind of approach can work in any employment sector, where there are jobs and where there are specific skills that those jobs need.
So at this stage then, with unemployment numbers, or the most vacancy, it seems, in areas such as, I suppose, health, it springs to mind first and foremost. Would that be the area you would see that the most need for?
Health, there's definitely a need there in the health and social care area. There's also a real need in, obviously, digital skills in IT. We've got a real shortage, again, of accountants, apparently, on the island. So it is everywhere, really. And I think it comes down to what Joe was talking about, that skills gap, having quite a lot of different angles to it. And so the key one, I think, is that skills shortage, which is where we just don't physically have enough people to fill all the jobs. So even if we trained everyone up on the Isle of Man to have all the skills they could possibly need, we still wouldn't be able to fill all the jobs that we have available. And so that is quite a key problem that the Department for Enterprise is trying to address. Whereas the other two elements of the skills shortage, making sure people have the right level of qualification for the jobs that are out there and making sure they're qualified in the right areas, that's kind of the two aspects of it that the Education Department is trying to sort.
And how about how predictive does that have to be as well? Because there may be a shortage or skills shortage in certain areas, but of course technology, we've seen how fast it moves. I mean, how much are you looking ahead to see that's where we're going to need?
It's a good question, and we rely quite a lot on industry to be able to tell us the kind of things that they need and where they think they're going to be. It really is the job of the education system to provide people with that foundation, those transferable skills that are timeless. They're never going to go out of fashion. They're never going to be not needed in industry. And then when you're only coming down to people actually getting at that last stage, saying, well, what very specific qualifications do I need for this particular job? That's where you then engage with industry to say, well, how can we make sure that those training qualifications are on offer? And I think you're right. It's always about keeping up to date. It's always about making sure that we don't have this fixed mindset that says, well, that's the particular IT qualification that we're going to run, and that's never going to change, because that's never going to work. There are always things that are moving, and there are always changes that are coming. And I think we're doing a better job now than we used to, and I think it is always going to keep getting better as people keep talking more, as education and industry interact more. I think we are going to start seeing things get better, really.